Thank you, Joe, for the kind introduction. And I want to thank all of you for coming. And I also want to thank our guests. As you can see, we have several people on the side of the screen over here. I would like them each to, well, we will get to introductions of them in a little bit, but we have tonight is truly multilingual in the sense that we have at least 3 languages represented, and from another part of the world. We have visitors from the Midwest and Oklahoma and Wisconsin, and they will be actually speaking for themselves. My part of this is relatively small, and that's probably good for all concerned. What I'd like to do is talk a little bit about, or tell you what we're going to try to talk about tonight. And we have presenters from the Oneida Nation. Pattie Morales and Mark Polis are some of the people I've worked with there. We have several people from the Osage Nation in Oklahoma. Our Cherokee Nation representative sent me an email first thing this morning, said that he had strep throat. So I am going to fill in with a set of slides that he sent, and you know me. We're going to talk about language technology in general and how it might apply to languages where the communities are pretty small, where there is no great corporate push to develop the technologies. And the 3 that we have represented tonight, the Oneida Nation, the Osage Nation, and the Cherokee Nation, represent some levels of using technology and how it can be applied with the modern world, especially with mobile devices. And then we will have a panel and answer your questions. And we will not stay too much later than we normally do because it is, of course, 2 hours later in the Midwest, Central Time Zone. Just to point this out, Jeanette and I can talk to you about this effort. It is run by the United Nations. So the Year of Indigenous Languages has been upon us since January. And that was part of the motivation for talking about this tonight. The languages of the world could be counted as more than 6,000. And not all of them are going to be in any of the user interfaces that we folks build. None of them, or not all of them, are going to be on your Android phone or your iMac or any other computer as a user interface. But they are still very important because, of course, language is culture. We tend not to think about it when we are in a big language group like the English language in the United States. It's the water in which we swim, and we assume that that is just natural. But our language is part of our culture, and for the people in smaller language communities, it's actually a critical part of their culture because they are working to maintain their culture and their language against the push of the much larger media civilizations that are around them. I just have a few slides to talk about some of the challenges, and then I'll have our guests speak, and then we will talk about some of the solutions after the presentations. The biggest challenges that I have faced here with working with smaller language communities is that very often when the language is written with a writing system that is not well supported with fonts, we often see these empty boxes, and we all know what they're called. They're called tofu because little white boxes with no flavor. Well, that's a big problem when you have a device that doesn't have the font. If you can install a font on your laptop or your desktop, then you may be able to use the writing system. But on a mobile device, that's not so easy. So missing fonts is a big part of it. Font encodings are often used to replace existing characters such as A through Z by the characters of another writing system. And that works great on desktops or laptops. When you can share text from one computer to the other and share the font with them, that works. And that's been done for a long, long time. Ever since text was being used on computers, people developed different ways of encoding it. And non-standard encodings are used, for example, for the Navajo language, because Navajo has characters that aren't represented in ASCII. So they hijacked 1 through 9 and 0 and a few other characters and replace them with vowels. As long as they do that, it works fine. But when you have the internet, these things don't work so well. So font encoding, as it's shown down at the bottom right here, is not as effective on the internet. And we have to be able to input data. And the biggest problem with many of these languages is, especially those who are using different writing systems, is there's no way to type the characters. And even if the character set is represented in a keyboard that you can access, maybe it's a language that is written with Latin characters, many times the accents or other diacritic marks just aren't available easily. So it's a pain in the neck to type the language, which means very often people don't. There's some other challenges that are faced. More advanced language technologies that we all take for granted, user interfaces in our native languages. That is not a given for people in smaller language communities. Many times the dictionaries aren't there, so we can't count on predictive text. And many of the online tools assume that the font is installed on your machine. Maybe it's not, in which case the website won't appear. Even if the characters are being presented, they will appear incorrectly, or they may not appear at all. Also, a lot of technologies now depend upon detecting what language some text is in. We write language technologies or language detection tools that basically scan the characters and say, oh, this is Danish, or it's English or Swahili, all written with Latin characters, but distinct enough for language recognizers. But there's not going to be a language recognizer for the many hundreds of languages beyond the top 200 that are in use on the internet. And basic data that we expect to be available everywhere, such as how you say the names of the days of the week and months of the year and things like that, are not available for most of these languages in public form. So the things we take for granted with big languages aren't there for many. And of course, generally speech input and speech output are not available in these languages yet. Now this sounds pretty bleak, but I hope to get a little more hopeful afterwards. So what I'd like to do is ask my friends from the Oneida Nation in Wisconsin to unmute and take over the presentation after I tell you a little bit about these folks. I was introduced to the folks in the Oneida Nation by another group, and I've been in communication with them for maybe a year, is it? And they presently, the group I'm talking with lives in Wisconsin, not far from Green Bay. And I'll let you tell them or tell everybody about yourselves, if that works okay. Pattie, are you ready to hear?
I am. I will clarify, I am not part of the Oneida Nation. I work at Indian Community School as the technology coordinator. The culture coordinator, Dr. Mark Paulus, is from the Oneida Nation. He is unfortunately on a delayed flight and is not connected yet. So we can speak to, I invited our head of school, Mr. Dropik, to join us, and we can speak a little bit to some of the information that Mark gave us, if you would like us to take over and do that presentation now.
Yeah, I'm ready for you to do that. That'd be
okay.
Great. And Mark, would you, Jason, would you like to say hello?
Yes, Sagoli, Jason Dropik Nungiets. So Mark will be really, really excited because I'm actually Bad River Band of Lake Superior Ojibwe. And here in Wisconsin, us Ojibwe and Oneidas, we have a good rivalry, kind of like the Bears and the Packers. And so he'll enjoy the fact that I'm representing the Oneida Nation today, and we'll definitely to mess that up too much. But greeted you, Sagoli. Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Dropik. I'm a member of the Bad River Band of Lake Superior Ojibwe, but also a little bit Oneida as well, and work at the Indian Community School. We're actually located right outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and we serve over 30 different tribal descendants at our school. So it's a very much intertribal school, but we are going to speak specifically on some of the work that we've done around 3 languages that we teach at the school: Oneida, Ojibwe, and Menominee.
Excellent. So Pattie, do you have slides or Jason?
I do.
Okay, so let's try presenting them and see. You got them? Okay, great. Let me You are on both our screens now, Patty.
Are you
Fantastic.
you're able to see the people of the Standing Stone?
We are, yes, we are seeing that.
Okay, thank you. So this is an example of some text we've been able to write using Chromebooks, which has been a really great experience. So Oneida means people of the Standing Stone. You'll notice the entire presentation is in purple. It's a very important color. There are 3 areas where the Oneida language is spoken in Wisconsin, Thames, Ontario, and Oneida, New York. So each of these links, I know we only have 15 minutes. Within the other presentation, I can send this along, has information about each of these groups. Mr. Dropik, did you want to share anything about any of that?
Sure, and this process started back in April of 2018. We were fortunate to work with Google. They came to our school, did some work with the students, and at that time, we had reached out to Google, and in particular through Olivia Heft, who was trying to help us. We were having difficulty getting fonts in platforms outside of Microsoft Word, and we're obviously trying to use Google Suites to do a lot of the work that we were doing. And being that you can't just go for an elementary school, we're 4-year-old kindergarten through 8th grade. For our school, it's very complex and difficult to get resources. So a lot of the resources that we use around language and culture have to be created by our language and culture staff. And then creating those texts with all of the special characters can be difficult. And in particular, when you're trying to produce things and to be able to share with your families, having that text is a vital part of the education process. And to Chris's point about language as culture, for the Oneida and many tribes, that language isn't just important for identifying who we are, but it's really, we can't perform ceremonies and ways of being without that language, without those words. And so being able to continue to speak and to share and to continue to influence language speakers, it's really important for us to continue this development, especially meeting people where they are today, which is through technology.
Awesome. So we have some current resources. I'm going to kind of go off of what Mr. Dropik was saying. Our need was there is a Unicode PC based version of the Oneida font, but as we start working with students and really wanting to meet them where they are and our families, we needed to find a way to be able to use that that text and that font on Chromebooks, on phones, anywhere that the students could be learning from and families could be communicating. So some ways that we do that, there are 2 apps that were created by the Oneida Nation, Speak Oneida and Speak Oneida 2. Those are both very important apps. They include the voices of the elders. And so it's an app that's widely used in our language class. And then the third thing you'll see is Keyman. Keyman is iPad and iPhone compatible. And so that is a program, an app that we've installed on the iPads, and many people have installed on their phones in order to type in the language on their phones. They can copy and paste from this program into anywhere they want to type. The other thing that we've really made sure that we've done is looked at Keyman as a programming option as well for languages where students and myself have started learning or could learn how to create keyboards on our own. This is an example of a resource that's available through the language resources in the Cultural Center. It's just a widely available on the internet. The link is at the bottom. Again, I can share, where it gives the different vowel sounds and the letter sounds that are common in the language. We also, this is the Google Input Tools keyboard that we created. Craig was wonderful to work with, and we also wound up being able to create a keyboard for Menominee, because we also have Menominee and Ojibwe language classes at the school. And then this Community Words app was something that was put together with Glide, which creates web clip based apps. And so we were able to create this app. I'm going to open it just so you can kind of see what it looks like, where you can go in, families can go in, and on a computer, it works on a phone, it works anywhere, and you can go in and hear and see the word. And so that's been a resource. We're working on standardizing our recordings, and then that will be something that will be available to our community as well. Mr. Dropik, did you want to add anything in before I move forward?
Sure, and we didn't hear the sound. Is it working on your end, but not ours?
Maybe it's because I have my headphones in. Let me see if I take them out if it works.
Sagoli.
That definitely worked.
Yes, good.
So that voice is one of our language teachers, and so part of the app is also wanting to continue to engage not just our staff in being able to create resources in our language and culture teachers, but at our school, we created a community words app as a way of increasing language use by every single person on the grounds. So from our cleaners to the food service to our teachers to the secretaries, everyone is committed to language and everyone's committed to a set of words that are essentially our no excuse words. Everyone's going to work on them. Everyone's going to know them. Each staff member picks at least one language to focus on. And then we have practice. So we continue to work on sharing those words of the week. We do that via Facebook as well, where we'll say the word students, will say the word share with their families. And then the app, once we get it standardized, will be shared with our families as well. For American Indians in urban situations, sometimes the use of language isn't always something that's enforced at home. And so we are also not just building capacity with our students and our staff, but really in some cases, families who are removed through whether it's boarding school era or other dynamics in the way that family structures had worked and the language was not spoken for an entire generation. So we're trying to make up some of that, especially where we're not on a reservation. And because we serve so many populations, we have to try to be as inclusive as we can and provide as many tools as we can. So that's where the Word app comes from. And that's how we use that. Keyboard was part of that process as well.
And then just some different goals. We had talked about making sure that tools that we're using are accessible to individuals with varied levels of comfort. So we have to acknowledge that whatever tools we're creating or utilizing can be used by children who are young, but that will also be accessible to students that are older and potentially elders or other people in the community who wouldn't be as comfortable using the tools. We wanted to also make sure that we're creating access to those keyboards with Chromebooks, iPads, phones, and anything in that Google for Education suite of products to have students be able to go to their Oneida language class or their Menominee language class or their Ojibwe language class and have their Google Classroom be in the language and have their assignments be in the language. Allows them to have that normalized sense of that language is culture. This is part of what we do. It's part of my everyday life. And then we were also had a goal of engaging students, families in the community through newsletters, the school website, and through learning tools. Mr. Dropik?
Yep, and then so just, wrapping all that together, thinking about even the way that students use tools and that purpose for language, our eighth grade students in their graduation, being able to write in their language kind of their goals for the future to share with the school community. When you can't find how your language is used or how it's not represented, what that does to a student who's developing their sense of identity, that marginalization of an entire group of people, though in our Native groups, it can be considered a small population, but every one of them has such a great impact and means so much to all of us in our community and what it means to be Native in this area and at this time and what we're going to do. So really appreciate Craig's work about helping us to be able to create more resources, have those tools that our other people just kind of expect to be there for in English or other languages, even Spanish and other places. But for us to be able to have that and show students that they count, they matter, there's goals beyond just the products that we produce. And so we're appreciative of that. Craig, just really big yell and go. Thank you, and Oneida, for all your work that you've done on that, helping us get to that point.
And I am going to stop presenting because that is what we have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I just want to make the point that emphasize the point they made. Identity is something that we all need. And when you're in a small group, identity is even more critical. And so what I have found when working with some of these folks is that even if we can't do everything that they would like to have for their languages, the fact that we pay some attention to them, that we give them a keyboard or help them find resources that they can learn to use on their own, helps build their community because they see, oh, we can do this stuff that we didn't think we could do before. The Cherokee, and I'll talk a little bit about more there, had great benefit in translating things not because the translation product was so important, but because they got the elders and the elementary school kids talking to each other about what words meant. The older people and the younger people were talking in their own language and getting excited about their language. So there are benefits besides just the language products. Great, thank you, folks. I would like to tell you a little bit about another group now. This is the Osage Nation, and they are primarily located in an area just north of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And this map is from Wikipedia. It shows the various groups that were moved to Oklahoma. Some of you may know about the Trail of Tears, where 5 different groups of people were moved from the American Southeast to Oklahoma starting in the 1830s. But there were many more groups that were moved to Oklahoma, over 60, maybe even approaching 70 different groups. So even the tiny areas on that map are different communities, some of which still have their language, but many of which do not have it in a living form anyway. But I've gotten in touch with the Osage Nation. I was introduced to them by my friends in the Cherokee Nation, and I would like the folks on from Oklahoma to introduce themselves. Mogri and Chris, I'm going to show your smiling faces.
Go ahead. My name is Herman. I'm with the Osage Nation. In the capacity of the master teacher, and I've been in the program since its conception back in 2004, and we've been trying to revive our language. Right now we're working with no speakers, and that's been a real big problem for us. But we have a lot of information that our elders have done through the past from the 1800s, mid 1800s, and maybe before that. I think Chris here, my associate here at the language department, has looked into some of our history on that, and maybe he might be able to explain some of that material that we have.
Yeah, like Uncle Moke said, my name's Christopher Cote. I've been here with the Osage Nation Language Department since 2017, February 2017, and I started learning this language when I was a kid. And at that time, when I was a kid, we still had speakers, and some of my first memories of this language was in the form of prayer, and that was my first exposure to this. On those documents and things like that Uncle Moke's talking about, them going way back. There's a document from 1834 called the First Book of the Osage. And there's notorious writings from Jesuits, from Father Ponce de Leon and James Owen Dorsey. And then even in the early 1900s, we had a Omaha man come down. His name was Francis the Flesh. He worked with many of our speakers. He was an anthropologist and did linguistics. Most of his work that he did focused mainly on the complexity of our religion and our secret societies. But then he also did a lot of work with the language as well and put out a dictionary in 1932. That was kind of the last time anybody did any work besides a man named Leahy, who did work with various speakers back in the 50s. And then there was another period in time where there was no work. It wasn't until the 1980s we had a linguist with the name Carolyn Quintero come. And she did extensive studies with what would have been our last speakers. And she put out a dictionary, and she also put out a grammar book. And those kind of the documents that we use. maybe Uncle Mo can kind of go off of kind of like who we are as maybe as a people, and what our main what maybe we want to express most about our people.
Chris, I wonder if I could introduce or have Mark Pearson introduce himself
Oh
briefly.
yeah, Mark's here.
So I'll show his smiling face. There you are. Mark, say hello.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Pearson. I am the in-house tech guru for the language department. I've worked for the Osage Nation for 12 years now. I came over from the IT department from information technologies to try to help the language hold on to their culture and try to spread and be able to teach their language. Again, I'm not a speaker, and as Uncle Moog will tell you that there's not many speakers left, that he is our master speaker. That was a difficult thing of coming in to try to basically bridge the gap between what we had in books and documents from the past and moving forward into technology to be able to give it to our teachers and for our students to learn. One of the main things that when I came in was to be able to figure out how we could do that, of course, using keyboards and using our font that Uncle Moog had worked on several years back. So the nice thing was is when a gentleman by the name of Joseph Erb from the Cherokee tribe had introduced me to Mr. Cornelius there. Again, grateful for that introduction, and that I could tell him our concerns that we were having. Then when we weren't basically system wide, we thought it'd be pretty simple that we could go in and say, all right, here's our orthography, here's our language. I do apologize. I was going to try to show some slides for you guys instead of leaving that up to Mogri and Chris, but I can't VPN into the network. But we do have, and if you guys, I'll see if I can share this, Craig. I was going to pull up basically keyboard here from Google Input Tools. Let's see if I can get this, if you guys can see this.
Let me see if, are you sharing a screen?
Yes, I'm going to try to share a screen here.
Yes. Give that a try. The button at the lower left or lower right should present. Let me try.
All right, well, it's just going to see the window here, so let me minimize something else here.
We have it, yes.
Okay, I didn't know if you're seeing it on top of Chris and those guys, so I'll just open up the mic document and put it on top of that.
Yes, we don't see Chris right at the moment.
Okay. So let me back up here. So basically, you guys, you can see the window of the keyboard of the Google Input Tools there. That is our orthography. As Uncle Moog designed that, basically of taking the sounds that we spoke, and instead of using Latin characters, is that he combined basically when he went through and picked the glyphs that, yes, they were kind of based off of Latin characters, but those symbols that you see there are a dedicated sound system associated to a specific sound in Osage. And so that was nice that we could get this keyboard out there. And the next thing was to be able to try to get it on all platforms. Easier said than done. And again, thanks to different people from Microsoft and to Google, as well as working with Keyman, that we try to get this on as many platforms as we can, so our teachers can basically show this language and share this with our students and people wanting to learn this, retain this knowledge. So again, it is nice that we were able to move forward once we actually got into Unicode several years back. Is that now, of course, we have some apps out as well on the Play Store as well as the iTunes Store. So we have two apps out now. One is a beginner app that basically goes over the basics, and our second app is called Sunny Goes to School, and it's more focused on, if I get this right, Chris, correct me, but it basically is broadening the knowledge of more of complete sentence structure instead of just vowels and nouns. Is that correct?
Yeah, it kind of goes along like that. It's an interactive story. And it really just kind of goes to basic conjugation of words. Conjugation. from there.
So tell us more. Is there more you'd like to tell us?
Sure. When it comes to these apps and everything, we spent a long time, extensive. I mean, I worked with another colleague named Cameron Pratt. He's a linguist, and so with my knowledge and his work, we kind of pulled it together to create it. I kind of wish I was better technologically, that I could like be able to present that in some way, but we put that out and we made that available for our people to use, which has actually made a really kind of great advancement for us to be able to get the content to our people so that they can learn on their own time. Because like as a teacher and everything, I work at our school, and then we even work in our community classes. But there's even people out there that doesn't seem like to be enough for them to have in just a class, and this gives them an opportunity to be able to use it wherever they are, and that's something that I really appreciate, and I'm really proud of the work that we did on it.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
Craig, I was going to show if Chris wanted to talk about this.
Please.
I pulled this up. One of our teachers that we had, Sharice Lookout, basically had done a test class with Google Class here last year. And one of the things, and again, I apologize, I can't pull up the PowerPoint since I'm not attached to my network, but I pulled this out of Google Class. Chris, can you see that, the orthography chart there?
Yeah, I can see that.
Basically, you wanted to kind of share, how we have that is our new Unicode orthography and from the primaries and blends. And I figured if you wanted to kind of touch base, if that would kind of help you out a little bit there of kind of explaining some of that to the folks there.
Okay, like Mark said before, this is a dedicated sound system. The one problem that we always had, and Uncle Mo has more of a testament to it than we do, is back in the day when they first tried to start teaching the language, they just said, sound it out the best you can. And we would end up with 3 different types of spellings for everything. And so when the department was made and was established in 2004, right? Right. It was established in 2004. Uncle Mo wanted to dedicate a sound system just for Osage. So here we have primary blends, modifiers, and modifier blends. So the primaries, it's just the 6 sounds, A, E, A, O, E, O. And then our primary blends, it's a combination of sounds of our main vowels, I, A, oin. And then we have modifiers. These are called modifiers because in the words, the vowel is more important than the consonant. And there's even some words they'll even drop a consonant and put the vowel together. And then we have modifier blends, which is a combination of 2 vowels. You'll never see a word except for like an exception if it was a consonant. You'll always be able to distinguish our syllables based on how it ends in a vowel.
Thank you very much. I wanted to say something that Mark and I have been talking about the last few days. It was mentioned that people have developed dictionaries and orthographies for Osage, but it hasn't been standardized. And so a big part of what I understand is being done there is trying to standardize it. But they have recently discovered that the dictionaries that were developed by scholars working with their tribes aren't owned by the Osage Nation. They are owned by universities and publishing houses. And that is another problem with indigenous languages around the world. The people who speak the language don't own the materials in some cases. And this is one example that makes things a little complicated. For example, to get a digital form of that dictionary requires things that haven't yet been figured out in Oklahoma. Is that safe to say, Mark?
Yes, I was actually going to show everyone. I was going to pull it up because you guys have a snippet there on Google Books, and I was going to try to pull that up real quick and show a page of that. And if we're okay with doing that.
Give it a try. One thing to note is that these things were developed with Latin-based letters, but of course, Latin-based letters or Latin letters aren't sufficient to represent all the sounds. So people invented orthographies, different scholars did, but these were invented, or these were built before the new orthography that you were just shown, or the new writing system that you were shown existed. So one of the challenges is, how do they teach young people with the old materials in the new writing system? Having any luck, Mark?
Yeah, I've got it pulled up. Give me 1 second here.
Okay, if you present, I can show it briefly. There we go. So Mark, would you like to say something about this?
I'll turn that one over to Chris and Mogri, but basically, as me being a non-speaker, and when I tried to reference the book itself, it was difficult if you didn't know how to read basically the markings in the book. And as we said before, that was the difficult thing, as Chris was saying, is that if you told somebody to sound out a word, of course, everyone did it. And even from different people that, wrote down what they'd heard and studied. And as this person, her name was Carolyn Quintero, and Mogri can tell you that he worked with her at one point in time. But again, when she marked that basically with the Latin markings with diacritic marks to help you enunciate the word, that was the difficult thing of going in. And I think that's why Mogri decided to come up with the dedicated sound system. So this one book, I believe, Chris, you said there's over 5,000 entries, roughly.
Yeah, there's a lot of entries. I do believe it's over 5,000 entries. Just basic vocabulary, and even like in context, like using it in context and being able to speak. So Carolyn, she used something called IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet, which is was kind of designed for Siouan languages. She really focused on Siouan languages. Osage belongs to the Degibah Sioux family. We're one of 5 tribes that make up that language family. Bonka, Umaha, Ugahba, Ganza, and Osage, which is us. So here, if you look and even in her alphabet that she used, it's got symbols that aren't even recognized by like just average day English speakers. There's people that have a hard time reading that sentence. Monzatia. They won't know what that backwards 6 thing with a line through it is, and why that A has a mark underneath it. So when Uncle Mo decided to create this sound system, it was just like take the opportunity for us as teachers to teach somebody to read and write with a sound system that is for the Osage language. And we were looking at taking this and transferring it, changing it to our orthography. But I guess we don't have the copyrights to it. So that causes a problem for us. So even then, we would really like it if we'd be able to get those rights for that, to be able to use it. Because this isn't, I won't say it. This doesn't belong to whoever they say it belongs to. It's our language. It's the language of my grandparents. It's the language of his grandparents and our grandparents before us, right, and our ancestors. So it makes it difficult when we want to do things with our language and influences that we so here, this is really good work, and this would have given us a really good step forward to be able to apply our sound system to this and be able to put it out there for our students and even us as teachers, as an educator myself, and trying to educate myself further than I can. it would have been a really good opportunity for us. And I still hope that we can find a way to make it work and make it happen.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you showing us that, Mark. And it's an example of one of the challenges. When writing systems are new, things are a little complicated. And those of us who speak English would not imagine using a writing system other than what we learned, which is a very old writing system when you think about it. The Romans were using the same letters that we are. But when there's a new writing system and it doesn't match with what is documented by academics, there's a mismatch in it, and it makes things even more complicated. I hate to say it, but I think I need to move on to our third language. And any last minute things to say from the Osage Nation? Okay, if you can hang on, we're going to have a Q&A period in a bit. I'm going to switch back to my presentation. And I am standing in for my friends in the Cherokee community. Let me just, since I have the opportunity to present the Cherokee, I'll give you just a little bit of history. About 7.5 years ago, I gave a man a ride to a youth camp up in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And I asked him his name, Vance Black Fox. And I said, oh, that's an interesting name. He says, yes, that's my tribal name. And he asked me what I did, and I said, I work with languages at Google. And he said, oh, I've got to introduce you to my cousin who is in the Cherokee department at Northeastern University in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. And that's how I got connected with the Cherokee. Personally, it's been one of the most fulfilling things that's happened to me in many years. I've gotten to know a lot more about people who've been living with us in the United States for many years. Actually, we've been living on their land, and I've learned a lot about the history that they didn't tell us when I was growing up. My hometown in Iowa has an Indian name, Makokata, but nobody ever talked about the people who spoke the language. Nobody ever talked about the history of those people who came before. And so at my tender age, a few years ago, I started learning much more about my own history from the Cherokee. There are actually two main communities of Cherokee. The Eastern Band is in the mountains in North Carolina. Those are the ones that did not get caught with Andrew Jackson's removal in the 1830s. And it was a removal at gunpoint where a third of the people in the Cherokee Nation died on the trip on foot to Oklahoma. They were one of the tribes in the first Trail of Tears. There were actually many removals. So there's a lot of history involved in language and culture as well. But the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma is much larger. It's estimated that there are between 15 and 20,000 people who speak the language, at least to some extent. And they have the resources to have a language department in the Cherokee Nation. And when we talk about the Cherokee Nation, it's not a government quite like a state government or a federal government. It is much more like a social benefits group. They do have a government, but they also are very conscious of their own community and taking care of their people. So they have many other aspects besides what we normally think about our state or county governments. And they cover the counties in Northeast Oklahoma, except for the few little tribes that are crammed in that corner up near Arkansas there. So the Cherokee Nation has a lot of artists. They've done many interesting things. I would like to play you a video, and if I'm lucky, the sound will work. If I'm not, I'd like to show you something put together by the Cherokee Nation about the language history.
Osio, Sigoya, Tawadoa, Ayata, Wolupa, Naski, Jalagi, Tigo Huelodi, Junohaka. Anijalagi, Nigo Hila, Utlista Andel Quasco, Didolki, Nana Nehoi, Naski Ijesti, Technology, Dajoya Shaheli, Nijulis Tanner, Go Huelodi, Canesti. Utanetli ya sani. Hia, ni dustuk, agayi, jutalena hai, ti go huelo di, ju no hianka, John Tesco no here Naski ni Dustana Jiggy to go well or de you know him go I say to go to his of de nu list Tanagi Naski Dinile Diski Una Dotti here Astana Nidasti to go well or de Gesergi no one no here Justi Talugiski Dison Stotti when you list Tanagi Dani Lace Diska Dan Diskagi Naski Jalagi Ayetli Duni Lake Tanna Junan Esti to go whaley Duni na ai Dick Hanoa Dunsty to go whaley Ale Naski Jalagi Jule Hiso Nai Agoyi and young we asked Juni Lake Tanagi go whaley na nai Kano Hesa Ni Julis Tannas Tanagi Ugoda Jude Tiata Ulo Shagi Naski Ani Jalagi Juni Luchagi Ahani Ani young we after Skadugi Jalagi Ayetli Uyana Uni Silda Nagi Jun Sano Hesti Wiguta Lati Naski Agoyi Nulistana Ahanatitli Udeliga Kaski Yogi Egoni Uweyai Ani Jalagi na yu Jigesa Nitigan with a lenata with a jetla technology Nuna Nagi Naski Tikalaya Diski Ale Jun Sanoheti So technology Ulu Jitlagi Naski na Tigo Huelo di son Stokti Ale Igi Woni Histi Nasku Udanetli Yasagi So Nela the Nelsko Jigesa Ichei Sudalegi Technology Ulu Jogi Naskina Kaneja Ahilegi Uno Sehagi Staya de Galavistanela Naski to go where Lodi Juno Haka to look Jitlagi Ahani Elohi Nitusta Agatohasti Asquangotiski Sonelo de Sonel Scotchgesa, a girl deeply Chigesa, up to Hasti, Asquangotiski, Chituna Nugo Jai, Galchote, at Nata, Nulistanagi, Joy, Judalan Nata, he used it, Jalagi, to go where Liski, to Northland Nagi. Naguchigi, Nuxkohi, Ulo Sasta, the Suyesti Naski, Jalagi, to go where Liski. Ani Jalagi. Nasku to go well or this, you know him ka, Dana Discon, a golieti, Dana ne hunky, Ale, a Nagaliski, go well, Naski, to go well or this, Ale, Asamati, Ditlano heti, go on histi, Nasku, go on dokti, na nai, yawi, Dini no jaslaski, Unata Klukai, Acto histiski. Aspangotiski, Yata Netin Nusti Nai, Nasku, Jutale Nata, he juicy, Actohistiski, Aspangotiski, Unatotlansa, Jalagi, to go well or the Juno Yanka, Nasku, no good, Yutana Tan, Anijalagi, Utajetlagi, Nitanatan Eli, Naski, technology, Anihili Sagi.
The history of the Cherokee writing system is something that's unique in all the world. This little video is describing the process by which the Cherokee Nation developed their language or writing system. About 200 years ago, a man named Sequoyah, who refused to learn the English language, saw that there was great power in the whites' use of books and written language, because the Cherokee did not have a written language at that point, but he saw that that was powerful. They called books talking leaves. And he said, my people need this. But he had seen books written in Latin, Greek, Hebrew, and English, of course, and he saw shapes of letters, and he worked for years to develop a writing system. And he built something called the Cherokee syllabary, which was about 85 characters. It still is 85 characters, but now they have an upper and a lower case. And he developed this and introduced it to the tribe, and they they couldn't understand what it was going to do for them until he took notes at a Cherokee Council meeting in his writing system. Then his daughter, who had learned the syllabary, came in, and she read the notes back to the Cherokee Governance Committee there, and they immediately understood that this is real. And within a few short years, the Cherokee were much more literate than the white people in that part of Georgia and Tennessee and North Carolina. And so they quickly developed technologies to support that. I'm going to switch to a set of slides that they went from talking leaves to writing of their own. And very quickly, people became literate. It's a syllabary. It is not an alphabet. So each sound is in their language is represented by a syllable. It's a lot like the kanas in Japanese. Kake, kiko, kuka. They have 6 vowels, and they have a range of consonants. And so the 85 characters can represent all the sounds in the Cherokee language. And this man is Sequoyah himself. He developed a written script for it, but very quickly they realized that they should have a printing press. And so this was quickly simplified and turned into a printed system because they got metal type, and they developed a press, and they were very quickly using their press to print flyers, print hymnals, print school books, print a newspaper that was actually printed in English and Cherokee. And I'm told that they were sometimes the same concepts that were written in both languages, but not always. And this is one of the first things that was actually printed in the Cherokee language using their Cherokee press. The Cherokee Phoenix is still published now. It was interrupted for a while during the removal. They had to get a new press because their original one in Georgia was destroyed. But books, almanacs, all kinds of things were used, and the Cherokee became very educated very quickly relative to all the people around them, including the other Americans. They also were very egalitarian. They educated women as well as men, and this is the original seminary, which is no longer there, but now at that same site is the Cherokee Heritage Center. They also were the first group to adopt the telephone west of the Mississippi. The Cherokee have always been very interested in technology. They adopted farming techniques from the white people in Georgia because they saw that they were some improvements. They adopted some technologies and kept much of their own, but they innovated on the telephone. And in the video, there's a man talking, and the other man on the other end of the wire hears, "Oh, this machine can talk Cherokee," because they were trying it out. This is a picture of the Cherokee keyboard. They contracted with typewriter manufacturers to actually build a keyboard with the upper and lower case. They could represent all the characters that they needed. And here is a picture of the actual type within that. And as technology advanced, some of you may remember this very, very cool device called the Selectric typewriter with a type ball. They contracted and built several of these type balls for the Selectric, and they were very expensive, but they enabled people to type, and then they could take the ball out and type in English and put it back. So they could use the same typewriter for the 2 languages that were most important. This is an example of a dictionary that was put together by a man named Durbin Feeling, who is one of the people who brought the language into the modern era. Like many of the Native Americans, there was a whole generation, at least one generation, that lost their languages. Why? Because of boarding schools, the children were taken away from parents, and in the schools, the children were not allowed to speak their native language. And so restoring that language has been a major part of the Cherokee effort. Here is a letter written in both the Cherokee and English by the first female chief of the Cherokee tribe, Wilma Mankiller. And she made use of this technology. They very quickly developed fonts when the computer era started, and these fonts were based upon the ASCII range, A through Z, replacing them with the Cherokee characters and more, of course, because they need more characters, but the upper and lower cases, plus a few others, gave the Cherokee characters. Other fonts were developed. In fact, quite a lot of fonts were developed. And then in 2000, the Cherokee writing system was adopted into Unicode. So they have their own code points now. And with Unicode, most of you know that the advantage of Unicode is that you don't have to switch out the old character set that you're using. The same codes can be used, or you can use ASCII codes for English, and you can use different Cherokee codes at the same time, so you can mix scripts. And the Cherokee standard was put into Unicode. They also have a Cherokee Braille, and they have advanced in their use of the Unicode standard, and almost all of their work now is in the Unicode standard. Macintosh added a Cherokee font and keyboards. They were one of the first companies to actually work with that. People are typing in Facebook and other social media using Cherokee now. There is an iPhone keyboard for Cherokee, which works very nicely. And those of you who can see it, notice that there are not 85 keys on that keyboard. It's an interesting model because there are 6 vowels and a small number of consonants. One can touch a consonant and then touch a consonant, and that picks up the 6 consonant vowel combinations that could be generated from that. So you touch a consonant and then the appropriate vowel sound from that, and 2 touches will give you any of the 85 characters in a very compact form. And with thumbs, that works very nicely. And that was invented by them working with the people at Apple. They also had the long press, so given a consonant, you can see all the vowel sounds, and it's actively used. They also can even use the iWatch, is that what it's called? And not to be outdone, my iWatch, or my Android watch before it died 6 months ago, could also do the Cherokee connected with Android. I built them a virtual keyboard. We worked together to come up with a keyboard, and this is one based upon the 85 characters. So it's Shift and Alt and so on. But we also put in there that the caps lock key would go to the English alphabet so that they could quickly switch back and forth between languages without having to go to a menu and pull things down, which is really important when you have 2 languages being actively used to be able to switch back and forth easily. We launched Google Search with the interface in the Cherokee language, and that was the translation effort that really got people excited about it. Not very many people use it, but it was exciting. And we also launched Gmail in the Cherokee language. And again, it was all volunteer translation. And we have one of the Gboard developers who actually launched the Cherokee keyboard for Android. And here's another picture of the Cherokee keyboard. They've done an awful lot, developing lots of fonts. There's something like 50 different Cherokee fonts now, most of them developed by the artists in the Cherokee Nation. They also were asked by Microsoft to localize the entire Windows 8 system and also Windows 10. And you can imagine how many millions of individual characters that required for the full translation. They also use localization tools, standard localization tools, because they've got the fonts and they've got the keyboards. And it all works. Oh, one thing which is interesting, they called books Talking Leaves. They needed to come up with a name for email in Cherokee. And so the email, I don't know the word for it in Cherokee, but the translation is lightning paper, which I think is just fantastic. And my wife heard that and she says, oh, you have to help these people keep their language. It is so poetic, and it really is. So there are many things that they have done. Here's them using a language portal, standard translation tools. They have applications. They're working very hard, and they continue to produce books, materials, but they use keyboards now. They produce all the things you would need for young people to learn. They have an immersion school. So between age 3 and 6th grade, education can be done for a small group of students only in a Cherokee language. And then they move to a junior high school and high school curriculum that includes English as well. But there's no problem learning the English language for these folks. And the kids become bilingual, and as was mentioned in the presentation from Wisconsin, often those children teach their parents some of the Cherokee language because that generation missed out on it. So they have their materials in their classrooms. They have maps of the world, maps of the counties of Oklahoma, and so on, all written in Cherokee. And these folks have also worked on all sorts of materials that are really fantastic because they have to. They built them themselves. They essentially have a print shop and a language laboratory in their classrooms for these kids. They, well, that's the end of the presentation, but there are many more stories I could tell about my interaction with the Cherokees, but suffice it to say that the Cherokee interaction has changed my life and made things very, very interesting. It's connected me with the Osage, other communities around the world. It has motivated me to learn much more about my own country and help me examine my place in this pretty complicated place we call the United States. So that's a little bit about Cherokee. What I'd like to do now is just, I mentioned that there would be some hopeful stuff, and I'd like to just talk a little bit about things going forward. My friends have already told you about things like virtual keyboards, so I don't really need to say much about that other than that Google Input Tools has a small set of keyboards for many languages. And like many other languages, sometimes there's more than one keyboard that works. We all, or most of us, know about the standard QWERTY keyboard and the Dvorak keyboard, different layouts. For Cherokee, there is a keyboard that has the 85 keys, which is really hard to remember, and also a phonetic version where one can type TSA, tsa, and then LA for la and gi, and that gives the 3 characters for the word Cherokee in that language. And even I can type it if I can hear it. Mobile devices support is actually getting better, but it's limited mostly not by the ability to develop the keyboards, but by the fonts as they are available. So for example, one can actually use the Osage keyboard, which I have put at the top here, top right. That's on my phone, but that's in the latest release of Android. Why can't they use it before? Because the font isn't available before Android 9. And without the font, you can't type. And we fought like heck to get the Cherokee font actually installed in Android devices by other manufacturers because they said, oh, we don't need that. Nobody's going to use it. Well, they wanted to save a few bytes. Now Cherokee is really adopted, and we hope that other fonts for other languages that are coming up around the world will be adopted by all the vendors. But it's slow and it's iffy because we don't control the Android environment in the same way that the other mobile device company does with its. We also have multilingual, and so at the lower right you can see that in Android it's possible to say I have a primary language and a secondary language. If the primary language that I've chosen is available in an application, it will choose that. So I have mine set here to Cherokee. If there were an app that was in the Cherokee language, it would appear first in that language. If not, it will fall back to English. If that's not available, it will fall back to Spanish and so on in the order in which I set. So the concept of multilingualism here is starting to be adopted or starting to be implemented in some of our products. In working with these folks, I couldn't open up Google's toolkit to them. So I built a little web page, or actually several different web pages, and they are just App Engine web pages that I use to build something, let them take a look at it for the keyboards, and then they would give me feedback and I would update that very quickly. So building some of these testing websites has actually been very interesting and fun. So here you can see at the lower left, the Cherokee keyboard. At the lower right, it's the Oneida keyboard. And at the upper right, it's the keyboard for Osage. And we explored this, and we have several versions of each of these, and we picked the ones we liked for actually publishing as part of Google's official input tools. We also built some converters. So when people developed text with some of the old fonts that had replacements for some of the existing letters, we can actually convert them. The conversion is not that hard. One says, here's a table of characters, and oh, they should really be converted to the Unicode characters. One can take text put it into a window and punch a button, and it will come out in the Unicode version, and then cutting and pasting of that is possible now. And I can also, I've written some programs that will actually take Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, and PowerPoints, and if the font has been used to show what text is in Oneida or Cherokee or Osage or other languages, they can be converted to the Unicode form, and then they'll work anywhere. So that's something that people don't think about, but older documentation is really important to preserve as part of their cultural heritage too. So I have a few final thoughts, and then I'd like to open it up for questions and have all of our speakers be able to respond. So the good news is that language support is really available for almost every language. One has to be modest in expectations. Google Translate is not going to be available for everybody anytime soon. However, existing scripts and fonts are really easy if you have a language that uses Latin characters or Arabic characters or an existing writing system where the fonts are already there. Most of the work is done, at least for enabling people to do something with their language. And if it's not, people should transition to Unicode as fast as possible, because the devices will have those fonts in them, and then the keyboards can be built on top of that. But right now, we can't deliver a keyboard before the font is available for some of those, and especially those languages that have been standardized in the last few years aren't going to be available in Africa and Asia and even in Oklahoma until the phone companies, the people who make the phones, and sometimes the internet service providers who deliver the updates think it's worth delivering their fonts to those devices. Many standard keyboards are already available. Google Input Tools has dozens of fonts. Gboard, which is available on every Android phone, has on the order of 750 different keyboards. The only problem is it's kind of hard to find it. But if you think you would like to work with a language and you don't think there's a keyboard, take a look at Gboard. You might already have that on your phone. You just have to turn it on. And as Pattie mentioned, the Keyman project is something where anyone can develop a keyboard and it will work on multiple devices. And that's actually a very good alternative, because it's pretty hard for us to develop more than the 750 keyboards we have already. But groups can build their own now, and that is an outstanding tool. There are other ones as well. On Windows, you can build keyboards fairly easily with some of the tools that are available there. My take on this is that language is amazing. Language is culture, and people want to keep their languages and culture. And if we can provide them with a few tools that will help them get excited about their language and use it daily, they will. My goal is for elementary school kids to send text messages to their parents in their native languages, telling them they're going to the library before they go over to their friend's house. And so if they can lie in texting in their own language, those kids are using their language, and that will help those languages survive to the next generations. So that's all I have to say. Thanks to all of our people remotely. Are there any questions? Are there any questions for our remote people? They need to go home, so they should, or they need to go to bed. It's getting late there, but if you have any questions, please ask.
Hi, regarding the Osage dictionaries, it was mentioned while you were saying about, talking about getting the same orthography, like how the copyright matter on dictionaries can affect getting people agreeing on the.
So let me see if I can rephrase your question. The question is about the dictionary. The dictionaries were done with a previous orthography, which was somewhat International Phonetic Alphabet, and that was actually developed before the new orthography was prepared. One of the things I'd like to do is get the dictionary in digital form and automatically, maybe with a Python script, convert the Osage parts of that to the new orthography. and they have a set of rules that might be able to do that. But getting the rights to use the digital form of that document is the tricky part. Does that answer your question?
Partially, yeah.
And Mark or Chris or Mogri, would you like to say more about that?
I'll speak on it. It was something that I come across here a while back, thinking about that it would be beneficial, and it's actually a misunderstanding on my part. I thought it was something that Craig could utilize to basically help us with predictive texting, and I had that assumption wrong. But when I talked to a few people, I said how cool it would be to basically have the capability to do that. And I'd actually asked Chris today, as we were writing basically a letter to our executive staff, that I was asked to actually today to write this letter after I got some news from OU Press in regards to the rights to the book. So I'd asked Chris basically in his words, to say the importance of it, of why we thought that was important to go that route. And Chris, I don't know if you want to kind of talk about what you sent me earlier today on that. You want to shoot on that?
If it's appropriate, I don't want to expose legal things that you're not ready to talk about.
No, it's fine. It was just basically from a teacher standpoint and from a learner of how that would be beneficial. Are you guys still there, Chris?
You're muted, Chris.
Okay, I'm back. What Mark was asking me to do earlier today was to, in the proposal that we were going to send to Amahika, we were going to write down what the reason why it's important, or the express importance of it, to be able to take it and to apply our orthography to it, to our dictionaries, is one, we just don't have very many resources outside of that. We do have teaching tools, but nothing in comparison to what the Cherokee have made. I've made some, but they're not very keen like that. They're kind of edgy, and I would do them different now. But now, so I was trying to express how if we take this just gives us another resource and something that Uncle Mogri spent a lot of time with him and a few other people who dedicated their time to this language, so that when people learn, we're not just teaching them one way of reading and writing, and then they got to go and learn this whole other way. It makes it hard. And so I was saying, so if we can take these multiple sources out there that are all different and bring them together where they're unison, it would take away the discrepancies and make it easier for everybody else to try to learn this language.
Okay, I would love to, thank you. I would love to take other questions if there are some for our presenters. Jeanette.
Hello, I actually don't have a question. I have a request. I want to say thank you very much for all three languages for sharing with us your journey to digitization and how you have led those efforts, and how, it has given, the importance to your younger generations to learn the language. The request I have is amongst the International Year of Indigenous Languages, one of the projects we're working with is to generate awareness in various language departments around the world in universities. So our project is to prepare some resources and material that professors can actually share with their students, and the students can do a bit of homework and some, research, and then create, a small report on Indigenous languages. Obviously, each country would have their own local languages to deal with. But I was wondering if you have any videos or articles that are in the public domain that you could share with us. Maybe make a list. Maybe Craig Cornelius can actually put us in touch if you have a small list of 2 or 3 videos or material that are general publications, that would be great. And if you're, of course, willing to share them with students at universities around the world.
Anybody have any response to that?
You can think about it.
Okay.
And let me know.
Yes. One thing that is important to note is that there are many videos about many languages, including Cherokee and others on YouTube and other video sources. One of the problems there is that there may not be a way of labeling that it's in that particular language. And so without the use of a language code, without the ability to say that this is in a language, many of these things are hard to find unless they are explicitly labeled in English for searching. So materials are, it requires more than just having the videos out there, but ways of actually finding them. I have a question, and unless there's another question from the crowd. To you folks out in the Central Time Zone, is there anything more that you would like people to understand better about your community? What is the most important thing that people should understand about the Oneida Nation, or the Ojibwe, or the Menominee, or the Osage Nations?
Sure, I would. So Jason, again, from Wisconsin, Ojibwe, working with many different tribes. I think the first thing to realize is that, each nation is unique. I think that often the biggest difficulty we run into when we're working with talking to non-linguists and people that aren't working in revitalization is that this is something that is easy, and just why don't you record it or take it? And there's some complexities that people just don't realize. And the fact that even in our school where we have 3 languages that are explicitly taught, there's 2 distinct language families that have very different rules and sets of expectations. So when you look at Oneida, which has over 200 pronouns that they use, and thinking about how that is different, where in Ojibwe, language or the verbs are really going to dictate how the sentence structure goes. There is just those differences. And so language itself, revitalization, is that, we're at a time, and our stories talk about it in the tribes around where I am, that we have an opportunity to really do some great things with language and culture, or it could be lost, and it could be lost forever. And that it's that vital for some of our languages. And when you put that in context, it's an extinction of an entire way of being. And so it's more than just words. It's more than just code. It's really, how do we continue to have those conversations, provide resources and support? We've been able to partner with the local university, University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and their language department to help extend further, but we still have so much more to do. And so higher ed offered the young lady up front talking about resources and can things be provided. Things can be provided. What is the use of them going to be? And then how do we help that to help our communities? So I think that, there's a lot. I think that being involved and just start reaching out to tribal communities in ways that, you can be of service and help, the way that Mr. Cornelius did with us, just offered up that time, and that, we had an idea, and we were fortunate. We were fortunate that someone came in from Google and connected us. Otherwise, I don't know where we would be with our language in that development. We'd still probably be handwriting and then photocopying things in and scanning it and sending it as PDFs, as opposed to creating it. And that really just slows down the process of deepening the understanding. Because we're at the same point. We don't want to be based on just some words you memorize. It's how do you understand and interact with language so that we can communicate and be whole. So there's a lot there, and appreciate opportunities like this to just expand people's thoughts around that, and encourage them to, visit those that are doing the work and see if there's ways that they can connect and help.
Thank you. That's excellent. Any other comments? We have a Mogri, would you like to say something?
Yes, we have a problem here with the same thing, in a way, because right now I'm educating our people on the differences between English and Osage. English being our meta language, the one we use to try to teach Osage, they're two different concepts. One of them is an analytical way of speaking, another is a glutical way of speaking. Not only that, but we have epithesis, which means our verbs split apart, and then you put the pronoun in. So in English, they inflect with tense, like sing, sing, and but Osage, they inflect with pronouns. So they're really, rather than a verb, they're really pronominal, which has a lot of little bound morphemes that connect to this, and it provides a big, long action, and they inflect with different actions. And I know there's some other languages that do the same thing. So that's just talking about one little thing that we have that's different than English, and the concepts are real large in trying to learn these things, and then we're trying to teach them, because our people, a lot of them that haven't been around our language, or hasn't been spoken in a long time, so it's hard to teach our language without them thinking it's a concept like an analytical language, one little sound after another, making sentence. So it's really difficult to do that. So all I'm doing is just setting up a program where I teach differences. Really haven't got into so much trying to learn the language rather than trying to educate them on there's really another way of thinking. And I'm pretty sure that other languages do this. And we have no way of teaching immersion because we don't have any speakers. And immersion ain't gonna work, so we're kind of wasting the time that with immersion. So we have to go in and try to teach from a structured concept free grammar, so to speak, to try to get across the differences. So I could go on and on and on about the differences, but that's just one little thing. So there's tons of them. And even the way that English handles issues, Osage handles them, but they handle them a little different. So there's a lot of differences in English and Osage. So it's just not across the board. This word is this word, and this word is that word. So our dictionaries have been, you say a word in Osage, and then you give it an English understanding, and then you go on with it and say, that's good enough. So, but it isn't good enough. There's a whole bunch more. So I don't want to take up too much time, but that's my spill on that.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question from the audience.
Yeah, I first wanted to say thank you to the presenters. It's really inspiring what they're doing for their communities. And it's sort of along that lines, I'm connected with some minority language communities in Africa, and I know that people in the diaspora are always interested in this sort of language preservation work. I'm wondering if there's a way to sort of make some of your success stories more readily available. I know you guys have a lot of your own work that you're doing for your own community, but I think there's a lot of people around the world that would be very interested in learning and being encouraged by the inspiration that you're, the inspiring examples that you're creating through the movements that you have there. So just wondering about forums and networks that could go laterally, not just directly with Google or directly with institutions of universities, but laterally amongst language communities to inspire one another. It's sort of a vague question. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Just encouraging that.
I think that's a terrific question. Are there organizations among the Native American communities in the United States that share technology and information and best practices in educating people?
Well, in our group, Craig, I mean, we've got coming up here just another week and a half, and we've done this before. And Mogri is at Degia, and what we've done before is in meetings in the past, and it's a group of several tribes. Mogri, could you say all the tribes that are part of Degiyah?
There's 5 tribes. There's the Osage, the Cote, the Tonka, the Wapaw, and there's another one, Omaha. So those 5 tribes together, that's the only thing that brings us together is that Degiyah meeting, and we can share some of the things that are differences in our language, because they all used to travel together and they spoke and they could understand each other. But nowadays, we've been so far apart through colonization that it's 5 different languages, where it used to be one, because they understood they talk just the same as they do nowadays, but because of our proximity was so close and we traveled together and hunted together, we could speak to each other, and each other spoke their language, and they all understand each other. So it's a little different now, and Degiyah allows us together now, once again. And we go a long way to try to close the gap on understanding one another.
Yeah. I'll add to that. We do have a couple of things that we have. We get together, we share the success, and try to tell stories about where we have made advances with our own languages. The Osage Nation newspaper, is they oftentimes share stories of things that we do, mostly with children. I work a lot with children up at our school. We have a school that we made. We call it Tapos Paonko Tapi, which means our school. So the newspaper takes times to like share things that we've done, but recently we started to revamp our website, and I have a colleague here. She's working on that, and she's also working towards getting on Facebook and updating our language page, so that we can personally share those ourselves. But to extend beyond the Osage tribe, we do meet with Degiyah, and when we go to the Degiyah, it's an opportunity for all 5 of us, all 5 tribes to come together and to be able to share our accomplishments and even our own struggles. And I hope that kind of answers the question.
Yes.
And any other comments?
Yeah, and I would just say as well, there's conferences, and usually for those conferences, there's always language tracks. And so even thinking about stabilizing Indigenous languages, they have an annual conference, the World Indigenous Peoples Conference on Education, that's only held every 3 years, always have tracks on language. The biggest issue that I see, especially in some of our tribal communities, is that those that are working on language revitalization, especially in those really small tribes and in particular remote areas, funding to get to those locations is a challenge. Being able to get to hearing what other people are doing and connecting is for many tribes and many of the people doing the work is very difficult. Those one conference, sending 2 people to a conference could do so much for a tribe for an entire school year as it relates to resources and materials, the cost of just getting there as well as attending. So I know that cost can be an issue in getting some folks together, but we're doing similar things, trying to share on social media as much as we can, have presence at some of those conferences, share what we can, continue to take ideas from others when we can, try to help all of our folks as well. So it's definitely out there, but it's a challenge as well.
One of the things I just mentioned is Translation Commons would be very interested in promoting best practices and help if you have things that you could write down that work well, things that don't work well, so that other people can learn from them. The Translation Commons effort for the Year of Indigenous Languages might be a way of sharing practices and techniques, and maybe even materials that would be useful. I don't want to keep our people in the Midwest or in the Central Time Zone up too late. Are there any other questions from the audience? All right, well, let's give a big thank you to the folks 2 hours away from us. And thank you to IMUG and Zoli, and I'll thank Google for the facility tonight. And I look forward to seeing you all at the next events. Oh, good night.
Well, maybe you can ask me. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, panelists.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.